to another episode of Roster Rescue, a Dynasty football podcast where we talk Dynasty football all day, every single day. And I'm on my third show already, and I have another special guest, Jeff Bell, who just seems to be doing a little bit of everything on all sorts of platforms. He's going to come in today to talk a little Dynasty football. Jeff, how are we doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Zack. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited. Any opportunity that we get to talk football, to talk Dynasty football, it's one I'm going to take. So I'm very appreciative.
Jeff, tell the beautiful people out there where they can find you, please.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter at @ForWhomJBellTolls. You can find me with Fantasy Pros. I'm doing Devy and NFL content with them. You can find me with Going for Two, where my show, The Devy Royale, is hosted. That is Tuesday nights at 9:30. And then I'm also on Coming Off the Edge. We do a little bit different. We talk about fantasy a little bit, but we talk about life as well. And that is on 7 o'clock some Tuesday nights as well. So you can find me a little bit of everywhere.
Awesome. What a busy man. And much respect for everybody out there putting out fantasy content. And Jeff's one of the best. And another guy, Jeff Lambert from GoingFor2.com. I want to always praise that guy. The amount of content he's putting out for GoingFor2.com is amazing. Big things on the horizon for that whole brand and you and everything you got going on. And this is Roster Rescue. And this is my third podcast. So I'm getting it off the ground and I'm having some amazing guests. Jeff, you are the next one in line. So let's just hope you match the first two. But no, I'm playing. I know you will. You're going to do great, baby. I know you are.
Try my very best. Austin's awesome to follow. So
Austin, Kyle also from Going for Two. Kyle, very impressive. Great fantasy mind. At Senra says, I'm going to shout out him. I'm having some great guests on here. And this is what it's all about. Talking football, talking Dynasty football. Rookie draft season in my head. We're about a month away from the 2021 draft. It's over. And almost all the rookie drafts in all my leagues have already been done because I'm sorry, we're degenerates. All our league mates we're just drooling thinking about doing the rookie draft. So it's kind of over. So now it's kind of in all the leagues, this kind of chats are kind of slow this week. So it is startup season. It is Dynasty startup season. And I'll tell you what, there's not many things I really, truly love in this world. I love my baby girl. I love my son. I love my wife. And I love Dynasty startups. I'm not going to play. So today we're going to focus in on strategy, on rankings, on Dynasty startups. And it's going to be the super flex format. Obviously PPR. I don't know who's playing standard these days. They're out there. I'm in one standard league. It was my first league. It's ancient, goes way back. It's like I haven't been in it all 25 years, but it's a 25-year-old league. It's standard settings, and it's okay, though. That's fine. That's the one league I do, though. Any startup league is not going to be standard. So we're going to go through some strategies on how to start your startup draft in Dynasty Superflex. Obviously, in my head, it's going to start with the quarterbacks. Jeff, I'm pretty sure you're going to agree here. It's get your quarterback early because after the young quarterbacks go off the board, they gone, and you're really going to be hurting at that position in the future years, even if you get an elder quarterback.
So I like to switch it up a little. So I am definitely quarterbacks at the top, and I think almost everyone is. The thing that I find interesting, and especially it depends on what draft slot you pull out of. But if you land here in one of the top 5 picks, I like to get aggressive with my other picks because we have it so preached in our head to trade down in the startup to accrue value. But you can do some things that you wouldn't normally be able to do with just draft picks versus names attached. And so my favorite move is, especially if you pull a top 5 pick, I try to trade my second round pick and ideally a 4th, but usually more realistically, it's a 3rd to move back up there again and get 2 picks in the top 5 and grab 2 of these quarterbacks. And that's
wow.
I've done that a couple times because, and the biggest key too is to swing back like an 8th or a 7th coming back. So you get in that 1st and like the 8th round, and then you're giving up your 2 and your 3. And I know that it's preached value to get as many guys in the top 60 as you possibly can. But at the same time, starting your roster out with 2 of these top 5 quarterbacks, it just completely transforms the league.
It's a game changer. If you can possibly get two of the, I have the top 7-8 quarterbacks. I think it falls off a little bit of a tier after that. If you can get two of those, you can build the rest of your roster around them very successfully. Now you always have to. It takes two to tango, Jeff. So you have to find somebody like that. You got to know the people in your league. You got to know who to go to. Some people they're not going to trade down. To me, I love to move up and down a startup draft board. I find value. I go get it. If I see, if I get sniped the pick before me, I always want to trade down because I'm pissed off. If I get sniped, I always want to trade down. So I move up and down my board. I try to accumulate future picks. I try to get 22 picks. In a startup in 2018, I actually accumulated 2 extra 2020 draft picks during the startup just because I was moving down, and they ended up being high picks in the 2020 draft. So it was beautiful. Yes. So it worked out when it works out. Yeah. But not everybody thinks like that. Not a lot of people like to trade down. More people like to trade up, but it takes two to tango. So if you can get a deal like that, like you're talking about, trade a second, a third to move back up in line to draft a Dak Prescott or even a Trevor Lawrence to go with another top quarterback, that's a game changer. Good luck though. That's a lot going on, and you have to have a really willing partner for that one. So who wants to give up a top 5 pick though, Jeff? That's the thing.
Absolutely, but at the same time, people get in there, and so many times you'll see it. I'm on the clock. I'd love to trade back, and like people that I feel like they started to circle in on grabbing these elite quarterbacks, and I do think that's a big change from kind of what we saw last year during startup season. Last year during startup season, it seemed like there was a lot more of the running backs going early, a lot more mixed in between the quarterbacks and the running backs. So the drafts that I did a handful of safe league startups last summer, throughout the summer. And so there it seemed like people were a little bit more willing to take that running back early. But I also think we've seen a change, and quarterback scoring, it was so wild this past year that Lamar Jackson last year in 2019 set the record for the highest quarterback score. I know Dak Prescott was on pace to smash that before he got hurt. But we're seeing Josh Allen had a fantastic year last year, finished as quarterback 1 on the season. And these guys, they just raised the bar so much. And it's gone from it being nice to have one of these Konami quarterbacks that can run the ball and throw the ball as well to you need them. And if you can get 2 of them, it completely transforms your entire roster.
I love it. So let's go through some rankings real quick. So let's say you're at 1-1. Mm-hmm. It's Patrick Mahomes all day, every day, twice on Sunday. Not even a question. We don't need to get into it. After 1-1, what's your next 4 or 5 quarterbacks look like?
So my next one would be Josh Allen. He was the quarterback 1 last year. I think all the pieces are in place there. They kept Brian Daboll. They've still got all their wide receivers. They added Emmanuel Sanders. I think Gabriel Davis is coming into his own. That offense relies around him. So he's my number 2. My number 3, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I have Dak Prescott as my number 3. The weapons are there in Dallas. The lack of a defense, I don't think the age difference is all that much when you're looking in the grand scheme of things compared to him and a guy like Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson. So I've got him as my number 3. My number 4, I've got Kyler Murray in that spot. Age, and I also think he's just a little bit better thrower of the ball than Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson, I think it's so overplayed, his accuracy issues. His athleticism creates windows that a normal player is not dealing in. But I do think that the Cliff Kingsbury offense, having DeAndre Hopkins there currently, they're a little bit more willing to throw the ball, obviously, and open the game up a little bit more. And then my 5th quarterback would be Lamar Jackson. The other guy that would be in that tier, but it's just so uncertain right now, would be Deshaun Watson as well. And I think that there's a little bit of a break after those guys. The other guys, but the guys behind them are going to be closing quick.
I was just going to say Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence.
Yes. My guy, Justin Fields, and I think Trey Lance is right there too.
I love it. I love that you brought Fields up. I'll get to him. Trust me, I'll get to him. Give me a second. Mine are very similar, which they should be. This isn't rocket science right now. My number 2 is Josh Allen. Wow, what a mighty step up from from 2019 to 2020. I can't wait to see him again. Number 3, I have Kyler Murray. Number 4, I do have Lamar, just because of the reasons you said, his rushing ability, they're getting him weapons. He's not going anywhere, and he's getting better making decisions and throwing the ball. And I think Bateman's going to help. Tylan Wallace can help. The offensive line should be, even though they lost Orlando Brown, they bring back Stanley, the running backs, the scheme. I love it. Lamar Jackson's going to ball. No worries about him. Justin Herbert, which you didn't mention, Trevor Lawrence, that's my 6 and 7 or 5 and 6, excuse me. And then I have Dak. So I think Dak's age puts him down a little bit behind a Trevor Lawrence and a Justin Herbert. He was coming off an injury, but he's in his prime. He's ready to go. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, Ezekiel Elliott. They're trying to rebuild the line, and you made a great point. That defense is going to keep them in the game no matter how they're playing in the first half every single week. Yes. He's going to have to make plays in the third and fourth quarter. And I still have Deshaun Watson at quarterback 8. So in my startup that I did pre-NFL draft, I had the 9th pick. Shitty pick. That's a shitty pick in a startup. It really is.
I hate it.
So let's talk about getting a shitty pick in a startup draft. Oh, so I'm sitting there. McCaffrey went 1-8. So we're into where maybe a running back starts going. Even in really, 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 really smart leagues, McCaffrey's still probably going to go in the first round. So it's Deshaun Watson, Saquon Barkley, or Joe Burrow in my head. And I couldn't, and I'm not a legal advisor. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know a ton of stuff. I usually like, if it's this long and this man's still not been in cuffs, I don't know if it's ever going to be a criminal case. Now, lawsuits, his playing status for 2021 is very much in the air, but I went ahead and I threw the dart. I took the bullet, I bit it, and I took Deshaun Watson in the first round. And because I think his upside's still there, his age, he's 25 years old. The team uncertainty, this thing, it's going to end up, you're going to get a resolution. You're going to get an answer finally. And I think it was too much to pass up. Now, I ended up getting Joe Burrow in the second round. So I went Deshaun Watson, I went Joe Burrow, and I faded running back, and I said I'll go back and get that later. I felt very fortunate to get Joe Burrow in that second round because he was going to be that second pick. But if I passed on Deshaun, I was probably going to go Burrow. Liked what he did, even though he's coming off an ACL injury. So that's how my quarterback situation goes. Burrow's at 9, DW4 is at 8, Russell Wilson's at 10. And then it falls off a cliff for me to the younger quarterbacks. I have Justin Fields 11, Trey Lance 12, Tua 13, Zach Wilson 14. So that's why I took Burrow, and I was very happy to get him, even though, I was thinking Justin Fields also pre-NFL draft. We didn't know where he was going to land. So how did you think I ended up doing there? Or do you think am I taking way too much of a risk with Deshaun Watson in the first round?
I'm not going to kill anybody for taking a risk. I actually took Deshaun Watson at the 404, I think it was, in a startup that I did a couple weeks back. He fell that far. I ended up my first pick was Lamar, and then I ended up taking at the turn I did a bunch of trades, and I ended up with the 212 and the 3-1, and I took Kittle and Kelsey at those spots in the tight end premium league, and then Watson was sitting there in the 4-4, and I really feel like that second, third round is where
That's fine. Ridiculous. I mean, congrats.
Thanks.
Congrats on you, but I had the guy at 2-2 saying he was going to take him.
Yeah. It's really, you kind of have to know your league, have to know the risk appetite. It's really hard to just, and you're playing Dynasty, you expect to be in the Dynasty for a while. So certainly people probably were a little bit too conservative there to allow him to need to get him at the 4-4. At the same time, I don't know. All those guys, really, once you get the top quarterbacks off the board, it's kind of 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. And that's kind of why I'm more willing to trade around in that area. I know from what I've seen, I don't love the third, the end of the third round, because I feel like you're getting you could move down in the 4th round further down and still get the same level player oftentimes, unless somebody really slides. And that's what I've observed so far, the startups that I've done, unless, one of these quarterbacks are sitting there.
I mean, the league was you talk about appetite. It's a quarterback appetite draft. I mean, Justin Fields went in the 2nd round. Trey Lance went in the late 2nd round. They were going after these young quarterbacks because that's what they want to build their team around. It's people that are digging their heels in and creating the team how they want, maybe not for 2021 success. I was playing with what I call my Shark League, where nobody's going anywhere. We've played in multiple leagues for multiple years. Nobody's going anywhere, and they want to build their team around their quarterbacks. I think Deshaun has too much upside, the pass. I mean, it hurt. It hurt a little bit. I mean, it looks good right now without a suspension next to him in my lineup, in my Flea Flicker lineup. Trust me. Yeah, it looks good right now. We'll see where it ends up towards September, but I'm not going to beat myself up. But if you got him at 4-4, bravo. That's instant smash all day. People are getting a little too scary. Like I said, we're talking about this is going on 3-4 months. He's never been in a pair of cuffs. He has asked for a trade pre all these cases coming out and everything like that. I'm more worried about the team. I'm more worried about him not trying to play this season because he doesn't want to, than them actually suspending him. I don't know. I think it goes back to millionaires not in cuffs. I usually think they're going to be okay at the end of it.
So this draft you did was in Flea Flicker?
Yeah.
Okay, so my draft was in Sleeper, and I do wonder, so we all preach stick to your boards, but I wonder how many people really have their own ranks out there, and it does seem like you can see a lot of swings in ADP between websites, and people will more often than not move with the ADP on the website that you're playing on. That's one of the biggest advantages that you can get in fantasy, is to understand the differences in your own personal board, but also the ADP between websites, because you're going to have – you can see some very different multiple round swings between some guys. And so I know that that's one of the biggest things that one of the first questions you should ever ask if you're going to get involved in the league is what site you're playing on, because that's going to give you the data set that you're dealing with and kind of steer a lot of people in your draft.
100% agree. You're exactly right. Totally. Know the league setting, know the platform you're playing on, and have your own ranks, because I don't want to hear any fucking excuses when I beat you. Seriously. So if Deshaun Watson was way down on the sleeper ranks, then maybe that's why he fell to you. Then bravo.
I believe he is pretty far down right now in the sleeper.
His 2021 status is very much up in the air, but this man's not going anywhere long term. He's not going to go do a 10-year sentence. It's just not for these crimes. Something else comes up. I don't know. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth too much, but for the exact things that like the 22 lawsuits or whatever, this man's not going to do a day in jail for any of this. If anything, this is a civil case. And if the commissioner wants to get involved and suspend him, then that's another story. It's not going to be for multiple years. He's going to end up in a situation where he's going to ball out again. So that it could be, all right, him or Trey Lance, they both might not play till 2022. I'm not taking Trey Lance over Deshaun Watson. I've seen Deshaun Watson do it way more than I've seen Trey Lance do it against Central Arkansas fucking State. Give me Deshaun Watson over Trey Lance. Give me Deshaun Watson even over Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson is 32. Talking about a 5'10" quarterback. We don't know his status in Seattle. I mean, there's so much uncertainty in a lot of these quarterbacks. So that's why if you could get 2 top 5 picks and trade up, go ahead and do that. And if you're in the first round, you're going quarterback. You're not letting Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, you're not letting these guys pass for anybody. But
yeah, I'm more aggressive with the young guys even then. So It's been well known at this point. I am a Justin Fields quarterback 1 from this draft class, and so I've got him above Trevor Lawrence in my ranks. I have him actually at my quarterback 7 and at my overall superflex 7. So I'm willing to swing the swing on him in the first round. I've got Lawrence at 8, and I've got Trey Lance right behind him at 9. So I'm swinging on these young guys because they're the most likely. So you can make the argument for Burrow. Certainly, what we saw his last year at LSU, and even the usage at the beginning of last year. But coming off that knee injury, I'm really concerned that we're going to see any sort of rushing floor for him. So I'm more willing to swing on some of these younger guys.
I believe they're going to build around him. So Justin Fields, I do love it. I think he's miles ahead of Trey Lance in real life. I can't believe the Jets passed up on him. I thought he was going to be I thought he was going to be perfect for that offense. Everybody fell in love with Zach Wilson, which I really liked him. Like September, I'm like, ooh, Zach Wilson. He's going to be a first-round pick. He's going to be a first-round pick. And I was ahead of the curve, I thought, a little bit. And then it was like he's top 5. And I was like, whoa, slow the train a little bit. And then he's like the locked-in number 2 player on the board come April. I'm not buying that. I like Zach Wilson. I like what the Jets did. They put some stuff around him, but not over Justin Fields. This is a guy that's proven it at Ohio State. 50 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in 2019. Yeah. He had one bad game. His Indiana game, if you go back and watch the tape, he was throwing dimes the whole game and had 3 interceptions, and it was his only bad 3 throws of the game. And I did a ton of film study on him, and I wrote up the full rookie profile on dynastynerds.com. And he has an A+ arm. He has A+ athleticism. He has a quick release. He has great footwork. The only thing this man struggles with is when he does put his head down the run and elude the pocket, he doesn't look back up. Mm-hmm. He doesn't look back up to be able to throw it down the field like a Russell Wilson or a Kyler Murray. He looks to run, or he gets a little like a brain fart or something, and then he like throws up a terrible pass like he did against Indiana. But when the play's scripted right and the guy's open, he's as good as anybody getting the ball out to his open wide receiver. And that's what I want a quarterback to do.
I think the biggest thing, he just didn't get reps is part of the problem. You know, he had that year he sat at Georgia, and then he smashed in 2019 with Ohio State, and then last year just the COVID year and the Buckeyes, whether or not they were going to have a season, that was all up in the air. Then they had half their games canceled because of COVID. But I just go back and, you know, certainly you can blame me for having Homer glasses on, but I saw him on the same field as Trevor Lawrence for 8 quarters, and he was the better quarterback over 8 quarters. Bottom line, full stop. And with very similar talent around them, very similar talent on the defenses, I absolutely believe he was the best quarterback for 8 quarters on the same field as the guy that everybody is just drooling over. And I think Trevor Lawrence is a fantastic prospect in his own right. It just seems to me that Trevor Lawrence's presence allowed Justin Fields kind of to get out of the spotlight. And I think you can go back last 10 years or whatever it might be, and Justin Fields probably would have been the number 1 quarterback in the draft, the guy that we were excited about all year. But because we're so excited about Trevor Lawrence, it allowed the spotlight to go elsewhere on the second guy.
And they beat him up a little bit. If he could have came out after last year, there wouldn't have been any questions. It's the more.
Yeah, and that Indiana game was the weirdest game because that game was over. Like Ohio State, I think it was something like 35-7, and there was a fumble deep in Indiana territory. It was a bad call by the officials to overturn it and not give it to Ohio State. They take that in. It's 42-7, and Indiana is playing their backups, and that's out the gate. It got away from the secondary, kind of broke down, allowed Michael Penix to make some big plays and kind of get back into the game a little bit more than the final score ended up closer than how that game ever felt. If you watch that game,
it was a blowout. Fields was throwing dimes, except for the 3 interceptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And they just blitzed nonstop, and they sold out, and he made 3 bad throws.
So let's go off the quarterbacks a little bit. Let's get into the running backs. So you're in the first round. Let's say we had 1-6. 1-6, the 6th best player to me is, what did I say? Justin Herbert. So you get Justin Herbert in the first round. All the other top quarterbacks end up leaving. So, and you're stuck with possibilities of some players like like Tua might be the best quarterback available, or you're a little more down on Joe Burrow than others. So you're like, where do these running backs start going for you? It starts with Christian McCaffrey and Saquon for me. I think that's a tier. That's tier 1. Then the rest, I've seen Jonathan Taylor as running back 1 and 2. So Jonathan Taylor is my 3. And then after that, it gets into some guys that, this is going to be so weird. My running back 4 and 5 are actually sells for me in Dynasty because it's Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara, but they're still that valuable because of the instant success. They're only 25, but they are very worn in. Very worn in. So, first of all, let me ask you, what do you think about McCaffrey and Saquon in their own tier? Are you a guy that thinks Jonathan Taylor deserves in that tier also?
I am a guy that has McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor in that tier and Saquon heading up the tier right below it. So the injury, kind of some of the concerns that we saw with the Giants, I don't know. Jason Garrett, I'm not sold. The games that we got out of Saquon last year, which was almost nothing, they just couldn't get anything going in the run game. So that concerns me, and putting him on that coming off the injury, I do think he's going to make full recovery, no problem. At the same time, there's just a little bit of concern there. Whereas the infrastructure in Indy for Jonathan Taylor, and if they were to, we've seen the practice clip from last week that everybody lost their mind over him down the field catching the ball. There's the rumors that he's on the jugs, 300, 400 catches a day. So I just think I don't know. Usage, sure, absolutely. You got to see it first, and I don't blame anybody for not having him in that tier before we see it. But at the same time, he kind of swung things at the end of last year for a lot of leagues. I know that the guy that won my Dynasty League had Jonathan Taylor last year. He got hot in the playoffs, and he swung the league. I know that watching the Bills playoff game, the Bills sold out to stop him in that Colts offense. And so that's kind of where I put him. Saquon's just that very start of that next tier.
I can't fault you for that. I think Saquon's on another level as long as he comes back healthy. I think he is a better pass catcher. He's better in the open field. JT is amazing, don't get me wrong, but he's not as lateral quick as Saquon, getting in and out of breaks. I think Saquon can break down a linebacker a lot easier to get open, and he's more elusive. The offensive line in Indy is obviously better. Frank Reich likes to add in some other backs. He really used Jonathan Taylor exclusively at the end of the season when you really needed him, so I'm not going to fault any of that too much. But Nyheim Hines is going to be involved. I don't know if they're going to bring in anybody else like they did Wilkins last year, but Hines is going to be involved on a lot of the third downs. Yes. So you got to love May. You got to love May on Twitter, because one pass catch by Jonathan Taylor in a routine fly route, and now all of a sudden everybody's calling him a 75 catch guy. It's not going to happen, guys. He's not going to catch 75 passes. He's just not. They don't want him to. They don't want to have to throw it that much. This is a power run team. So he's definitely my number 3. Number 4 was really hard. It was between Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb is involved. Then we get into the 2020 class of the Swift, the Cam Akers, the Edwards-Helaire, Dobbins. I didn't know where to go. I want to go youth. It's Dynasty. You want to get youth. But Alvin Kamara just 6 touchdowns. And that's crazy. He's my 4, but I don't think he's as valuable as he was at the end of last year. Drew Brees is gone, and those 80-plus catches every single year. I don't know if that's going to happen with Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill or whoever's going to be the quarterback going forward. And Dalvin Cook, the injury concerns it's like these are the top of the top guys, but I still have, stones to throw at them. So I'm a little sketchy. What do you think that tier looks like after Jonathan Taylor? To me, it's Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers. That's my top 8.
So I am putting and so my tier, I include Antonio Gibson and Najee Harris in that tier. I'm willing to swing on the rookie. I have him number 10. I have Antonio Gibson number 9. I think that from every indication, I think we're going to get the usage that we really want to see. They kind of eased him in last year, but I know obviously Ron Rivera had Christian McCaffrey, and they've talked about Antonio Gibson being in that Christian McCaffrey role. I've got DeAndre Swift at number 8. The concern, you just don't know what Anthony Lynn is going to do, and you don't know about how the Lions are going to use him. And he's my running back. I have a home dynasty league, and he's my running back 1, because you'll come to learn I tend to fade running backs when I'm doing the startup, and so I kind of build later. And we are in our second year in the home league, and the guys don't want to draft until August, so I'm chomping at the bit, and they all want all the information they can get. So I'm waiting to see if I can get I have the 106, so I'm seeing what I'm going to do there. But in August, it could be a very different picture than what it is right now. I've got Cam Akers at number 7, and it really just goes back to all the DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson, and probably even Najee Harris. If we were to see the things that we want to see, you'd be comfortable putting them above the guys that have been elite for the last couple of years, but we haven't got all the way there on any of them. And so that's kind of why they're sitting in that area right behind them. So going up, I got Dalvin Cook at number 4, Alvin Kamara at number 5, and then Nick Chubb at number 6 is where I currently sit.
Wow, we're very similar. That's the same 3 players. Nick Chubb. God, I love Nick Chubb. A pure runner.
All these guys, man. Nick Chubb could be number 2 if he just was free to just go. But
if they threw the ball to him a little bit more, that offensive line is nasty.
Yeah.
The Cleveland Browns, I mean, it took 30, 40 years, but they finally got a fucking team. Watch out for them. Nick Chubb, I would be surprised. I would be very surprised if he played every single game and he didn't have 1,600 total yards, 12, 15 touchdowns. I mean, it's going to happen. He's that good. That offensive is that good. The offensive line is that great. Look out for him. I'm interested on a player, and I'm going to cue some tape that you brought him into the first tier, and it's Najee Harris, or not the first tier, the tier after. Mm-hmm. And it's Najee Harris, and we're watching a little Alabama tape right now, Jeff, and it seems like you're a little higher on him than I am. I have him at RB11 behind J.K. Dobbins, behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and it's not because of talent. It's not because of talent or anything. Like, Pittsburgh doesn't have a ton around him, and we're watching him tear up. This is one of my favorite runs against South Carolina. This was actually in 2019 when he should have came out and been part of that epic 2020 class, because we hear a bunch of bullshit. Oh my God, he's already 23. He's already 23. Najee barely played his freshman and sophomore years. He didn't take a ton of hits his junior season. And in his senior seasons, he did get a big boy workload, for sure. Big boy workload. So what do you think about him at RB11? Where did you have him again?
I have him running back 10. So I'm not that far off from you.
So we are right there.
Yeah, and it goes back to Mike Tomlin. Pittsburgh has traditionally had a bell cow back, and they've preached that they want to get back to that. So it's some speculation there. Certainly, there are concerns about the offensive line, and we haven't seen him do it at the NFL level. So if you want to put him behind, I can't blame you putting him behind Dobbins. I'm an Ohio State guy, and I love Dobbins, and it's just we've seen production out of that role in Baltimore, but you just kind of feel like Gus is going to steal a lot of high leverage carries around the goal line. Dobbins can do it. It's just whether or not Baltimore is going to allow him to do it. And then Lamar on the ground as well. It's just kind of just a little bit of enough that I think that as it's currently constructed, absent a surprise that we're not expecting, or Dobbins' usage is just much higher than what we're projecting. Najee Harris has a bigger ceiling right now. And so in terms of fantasy production here in the near term.
You see, J.K. Dobbins is actually one of my top 5 buys in Dynasty. It's because of the same things you just said. And we're talking about an RB I have at 10 right now, and a lot of people have it right around the same area, but he averaged 6 yards per carry. And talking to an Ohio State fan, I watched a ton of Ohio State games. It looks like he actually gained burst, gained elusiveness, and it's okay if Gus Edwards is banging around linebackers and DNs and safeties and corners in the first part of the game. I think there's going to be enough touches. There are going to be enough carries. This team, almost 3,000 yards rushing last season. I mean, it's ridiculous. Almost 200 yards a game. There's plenty of carries. Lamar Jackson, he was running less for basically most of the year. He kind of turned it on in December when they were really when they had to make a playoff run. So the start of the season, I don't think you're not going to see Lamar run as much going forward in his career. You're just not. He's going to be working on his passing. They brought in the wide receivers to open up the offense. I love the offensive line. The defense is going to keep them in games. They're running the ball in the third and fourth quarter. You see the talent there. I'm a lean towards talent. I almost know what you're going to say, that no running back has had over 16 carries since Lamar's been the starting quarterback in Baltimore in one single game. That's okay if you average 6 yards per carry. It's okay if you're making defenders look silly and you're getting into the second tier of the defense and you're making big plays. I'm projecting that they're going to use them a little bit more in the pass game. Give me 45, 50, 55 catches. I think that can bump him into that top tier. The talent's there, and he's on the right team. I know that this is the team. I know he's going to be productive. If he stays a little bit fresh, I mean, Alvin Kamara, He's not getting 25 touches a game or 25 carries, and he catches the ball a lot more, obviously. But when he was coming in behind Mark Ingram and even Lat Murray, I mean, he's coming in fresh. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And J.K. Dobbins is just, I just feel it. He's going to explode, Jeff. He's going to explode.
I'm pulling for you. Certainly. It'd be great to see it. I do think that last year they really struggled losing Marshall Yanda, and the defensive tackles were just blowing up Lamar's face. And I think they really struggled with that until towards the end of the season. The concern, the passing, you touched on it a little bit. If we see more out of the passing game, that'd be fantastic. I think a lot of what we see with these running quarterbacks versus, like, you look at a guy like Najee, we know Big Ben's not going to be running. So if he's getting 3 or 4 or 5 dump offs per game to the running back, then all of a sudden you're adding up 5, 6, 7 points. And if you're in full PPR, that J.K. Dobbins, Lamar's keeping those carries. And so and some of those turn into touchdowns. It's just a higher ceiling is what I see there. And the talent is there, and I don't blame you at all for leaning on the talent. I don't blame you at all for buying into that offense. If it gets back to where it was in the 2019 season, the productivity is certainly going to be there. It's just kind of, I'm a little bit hesitant just to get all the way there. And I got him. I have him as number 11, so it's not like I'm way difference. And I think that it's one of those, it makes for fun content, and it's a fun thing to talk about, but really when it breaks down to it, we're talking about running back 10 and running back 11. And so you're happy.
Sometimes that's a decision you're going to have to make at 2-7.
It is a tier break.
Or whenever you need your running back.
Yeah, it is a tier break for me. That, to be fair, it's my tier break 2 versus tier break 3. I've got Najee in the tier 2, and I've got JK heading up tier 3, and that's just the biggest question. Just have more questions around him, and if those get answered definitively in the positive, then certainly he's going to be in that tier 2, and he could shoot up the boards. And I think he's a great dynasty buy if you find somebody that is even more cautious than both of we are. So yeah, I don't blame you at all for having him as a buy.
So I want to do a little projections. Let's say going forward a little bit. We talked about the ages of Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook. These guys are taking a ton of hits, and I think a player that can jump into their spot next season in dynasty rankings is Cam Akers. And for everybody that's not watching the live stream, I'm queuing up some tape on these guys right now, and this is some college tape of Cam Akers that I absolutely loved Cam last year, and it was scary for a while. It was very scary what McVay was doing with that backfield, but I knew the talent of this kid. I knew he was undervalued because of how weak Florida State's offensive line was and how their offense was struggling the whole 2019 season, and even before that in 2018 and 2017. I knew the talent was there. I knew he could do multiple things, and I know Sean McVay is my favorite OC in the NFL. We've seen him produce Todd Gurley and win you fantasy championships. So I saw Cam Akers there as being that same type of guy, maybe not the same type of player, but he can be that same type of performer because of the things he can do. So do you think this is a guy that can jump into that top 5 next year and be maybe even on the heels of McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor? Because it is a McVay offense. They get their quarterback. They're bringing in more weapons. The offensive line is not a bunch of names that we know, but they were productive when they needed to last year. Cam Akers, it's Cam motherfucking Akers since he got drafted by the Rams for me. So I'm all behind Cam Akers. What do you think?
Absolutely. He's my running back 7. I think the 2 most likely guys to ascend in the top 5 would be him and Antonio Gibson. Physically, I think they're the most talented running backs in that next kind of tier. We're just waiting for the questions on the usage from the teams. I don't know. Darrell Henderson doesn't seem to fully grasp the position. I think there's a lot of concern, a lot of hesitation on McVay to really. He used him a lot more last year than the year before, and physically he's got some gifts as well. But I do believe that they are going to put Akers into that bell cow role. They're not going to mess around this year. They brought Stafford in. They don't have draft picks, so they are all in. And so I think that they're going to have that willingness to put Akers up there. And it just kind of goes back to that leap of faith that we've seen these guys in the league for a season. We've seen flashes, but we haven't seen it all put together yet to put them above all those elite guys. And to be fair, I'm just naturally lower on running backs in a startup. And so I usually do not find myself ending up with the top guys, but Akers is a guy that I could buy myself into, but I do like to get those quarterbacks squared away early, and I like to get tight ends squared away early. I'm a big believer in getting one of the top tight ends.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So Cam Akers is a big projection up that this guy could possibly be RB1 coming up. I mean, he's on that right team. He's if McVay lets him tote the rock, and we've seen a couple plays in there where he was catching the ball, and I want to see a lot more of that. So now I really want to hear it. I've heard you say it about 2 or 3 times. So you're somebody that fades running backs. So you want to go quarterback heavy, and you want to go tight end heavy. I guess I get that. So when do the wide receivers start creeping up in your head in these startups? Because it's a position that I fade. You fade running backs. I go all in to try to get running backs and quarterbacks. I usually try to find a tight end later. And wide receivers, the depth is so great. That's the position I usually don't try to touch until the 5th round, the 6th round, unless there is just an absolute steal that falls on my lap. I'm trying to get all the quarterbacks and all the running backs I possibly can at good ages. And then I go find maybe some of the 2nd tier, 3rd tier wide receivers. In a draft I did earlier that I mentioned, I went running back and quarterback heavy, and then I ended up getting DJ Moore in the 5th, Chris Godwin in the 6th, and then I got Kenny Golladay in the 7th. So there's no fucking way anybody in the world would ever be mad at me to end up with those wide receivers at the end of a startup. It doesn't always end up like that, but when do you want to go start picking up some of those top wide receivers, and who leads off your board? Because everybody has a different set of top 5 wide receiver rankings. Because I've seen 5 different number 1 wide receivers by 5 different smart fantasy people.
So I've been A.J. Brown as my wide receiver number 1 since January. I never got there on Devontae Adams, and now with the uncertainty with Aaron Rodgers, I've bumped him down even just a little bit more. So I've been an A.J. Brown believer. I think the volume, the target share is going to be there. I think the talent, we've seen it. He just smashed like several times when he got the volume. And so that's been my wide receiver 1. It's usually I'm more willing, and again, redraft versus dynasty, I take 2 entirely different approaches. I'm more willing in that 2nd, 3rd round to start grabbing wide receivers, and I just keep taking them. I just continue. You can see my teams. Like I try to get 6, 7, 8 wide receivers. So like I just load up. Like I keep going. And yes, and I very much fade running backs in the dynasty startups that I've done this offseason. I just keep taking wide receivers. You see the value that falls throughout. Guys like Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Ayuk ends up on all my teams. And so, but I have them more as like on the teams that I build, instead of hoping they're the wide receiver 2, they're more like my wide receiver 3s and 4s. And I'm building just a ton of depth out of wide receiver. My 2, we talked about at the start of the show, I get very aggressive to try to trade up to get multiple of these quarterbacks, and that usually kind of leaves me in a lull until the 4th round, where like thrilled to get a guy like Calvin Ridley in that spot. So that's kind of how I usually have built the teams that I've built this offseason. Get aggressive, use those 2nd, 3rd round picks, get something back on the back end, and you can get a guy like Chase Claypool has moved up a little bit. Juju Smith-Schuster is the guy that I'm willing to take in the 7th and 8th round. So I like to build around 2 elite young quarterbacks and just keep peppering those wide receivers until you really fall out of it. And the way that I really try to target a dynasty roster is to have 6, 7, 8 wide receivers right in that tier that you really love. And then we see production come in from the wide receivers, but I'm a big believer that most often teams are going to stick to their top 2 targets in their target tree, and to rely on other guys, you're playing Russian roulette oftentimes when you're kind of getting out of those top 2 targets in a target tree for a team. And so that's why I want to build as many of those wide receivers as I can to fill my flex spots with those guys. And then running back, I'm a firm believer that running back is just more of a plug and play position. Certainly the guys at the top, Christian McCaffrey can drop 30, 35 points, and that can swing weeks for you. But we're dealing with shelf lives there. And it's it's one of those things that the shelf life is, even in my mind, a little bit shorter than what the reality of the production is, just because it's near impossible to get real value for a guy when he's in that running back. They enter that dead zone that last year or two. Nobody's going to want to trade for him. So you're stuck with them unless you take a lot of value less. But it also opens up that flexibility that if you need to get aggressive, you need to use your draft picks or whatever it might be to kind of fill those holes later.
I want to mention something real quick before I get in on this. You brought up two of my buy players, and they were wide receivers. Chase Claypool, go buy him at his price right now. If he was a top 10 pick, he would be he'd go 3 rounds earlier. He was a late second round pick, and everybody's worried about Big Ben, but I think he has some attributes that are quarterback friendly. Doesn't matter who's thrown to him when you're 6'4", 230 and run a 4.42. And he really showed a lot of things that he didn't show at Notre Dame to me last year. He showed much quicker feet. He showed a good route tree. I seen him getting in and out of routes and creating separation when at Notre Dame he was kind of just a straight line deep guy and jump over you. He was getting open against good corners. And Jerry Jeudy is my number one buy. If this guy can work on concentration a little bit, he is a top 5 route runner already in this league, only in his second year. I mean, he was making people look silly. Hopefully the quarterback situation gets a little bit better there and his concentration issues get better, but at his price, because he's a little bit more down, I don't think there's a talent difference in Justin Jefferson and Jerry Jeudy, because there isn't. There fucking isn't. Those two players are very similar skill sets. One had a better rookie season. Let's see who has the better second season. And I'm not joking on this. And it's not because I don't like Justin Jefferson, who's not going to like him right now. So those were two of my top buys. But I have to go at you a little bit. If you're talking about fade running back, and you're playing in very competitive leagues and shark leagues, Jeff, who are you ending up starting as your running backs, man? I have a feeling you have a lot of Chris Carsons, maybe Kareem Hunts if you're lucky. If you're lucky here, I mean, I'm going down my board a little bit. Maybe Ronald Jones, Fournette, Gordon. Are you buying some rentals here? I mean, who's going to be there for you if you're passing on running back as far as you're talking about?
So it's changed now a little bit, but early in startups, I got a lot of Chase Edmonds, and I'm a Damian Harris guy. So guys like that, Zach Moss, I'm buying him. So that's usually the types of guys that I'm loading in here, and just very late, super late. I like Darrington Evans as a guy that is going to have a role in that offense. Nyheim Hines is a guy that I get quite often. He's usually in like that 14th round. And I'm trying to get as many of those young running backs that if something breaks their way, they're usable for. If I get a month out of them, it's fantastic. And you know what? If it sinks my roster, I am loaded with. But the thing of it is too, not everybody's going to win your league. And so when you're loaded up with these young wide receivers, you're loaded up with these young top quarterbacks, if your season gets sunk, like we see in this draft now, where Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne are kind of falling in that middle of the first round, either, you know what, if a ship sails on the season because you couldn't find streaming running backs to get through, you're going to be in position where you can draft them in the draft, and the value on it's going to be much different than if you're using these earlier picks on these guys in startups.
I guess I'm just opposite.
That's fine. And you know what?
I'm going to fade wide receivers, just like I said.
Styles make fights, man, and that's why it's fun to be in different leagues with different people that build rosters different ways. I mentioned that
my top 22 running backs, and then there is a Grand Canyon of a cliff. And I'm not going to just mention every single one of them. They should be absolutely the same for everybody. And after that cliff, I almost don't want to barely roster any of these players unless they completely fall in my lap. I did get Ronald Jones in like the 9th round. He's currently my RB24.
Yeah, of the teams I built last year, I had a ton of Ronald Jones on those teams using a similar style. So I got a ton of Ronald Jones on those teams that I built last year. Last year, I got a whole bunch of Kareem Hunt. The value was perfect on him last year. So you can find guys. I'm saying
but they're just guys. Like I want to go get Cam Akers. Like to me, is it Cam Akers or your wide receiver 1? Is it J.K. Dobbins or your wide receiver 1, which is A.J. Brown? Which route do you go, Jeff?
I'd take AJ Brown, or I'd take tight end.
That's crazy to me. See, I'd rather, to me, okay, if we want to talk my number 24 running back versus my number 24 wide receiver.
Look at this class, though. Do you take Jamar Chase, do you take Kyle Pitts, or do you take ETN and Najee Harris? And when you're in a rookie draft,
I take ETN and Najee Harris because I think
and I take Jamar Chase and Kyle Pitts all day over those guys.
And that's why I guess we're different. But if it breaks down to I'll never be mad at you for going through and just picking value in a startup. To me, wide receivers, it's hard. It's really hard to get their value in a trade for a different position. If you want to go out and get a running back and someone says, you're RB1, let me give you my wide receiver 1, it never happens. At least in the leagues I play. It's very hard to get a quarterback without trading a quarterback to get a quarterback. It's very hard to get a top-tier running back without trading a running back. So to me, give me the Cam Akers, give me Josh Jacobs or Javonte Williams, and then I'll find my wide receivers in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round. I mean, we're talking, like I said, Ronald Jones is like you're hoping he might be a starter. And you mentioned, and Mike Evans is my RB or my wide receiver 24. So if I wait, would I rather have, or if we just do, would I rather have Ronald Jones and AJ Brown, or would I rather have Cam Akers and Mike Evans? So
I don't know if that doesn't seem quite. That seems like a false equivalency of Mike Evans. I'd rather have AJ Brown and Mike Evans. There's not a wrong way. At the same time. A lot of these teams that we're building. So most of the leagues that I play in, you're starting 10 guys. 2 of those are super flex positions. So you're starting 8 guys. And really, you look at wide receivers, and certainly there's deeper guys that come in. But at the same time, once you get past wide receiver 48-ish, that's your wide receiver 4 on your team. It just falls off a cliff on production, and you're playing whack-a-mole. And I think the biggest thing you talk about the running back cliff being around 22. It's kind of the same thing. Once you get past outside of the top 30, top 40 wide receivers, you're facing very similar cliffs. And so I agree that talent comes in, that it's also one of those things that I feel like I see a lot of people saying, you can find guys later. But the problem is you've got 12 teams in your league that are also 11 other teams that are also looking for those guys later. So it's not like you're just mining all the other available options and you get them automatically. You got a limited roster that you're dealing with, and you're doing your very, very best to place your bets. But meanwhile, you've got other people doing the same things. And so diminishing that pool.
My thing is multiple teams can have multiple wide receivers score fantasy points at a high rate. Dallas is going to have 3 good wide receivers. Now, very few teams have multiple running backs that are putting up these type of numbers. So when you get into the 40s, at running backs, I mean, we're talking Darrell Sanders or Darrell Henderson, Tony Pollard. We're talking handcuffs. When you're in the 40s at wide receiver, I got Tyler Boyd at 37. Thielen might be older. He's around that. Michael Gallup is wide receiver 40. Michael Pittman, Terrence Marshall, Bateman, some of these younger guys, Will Fuller. I can play with that. I can't play with
But I can have all those guys on my team too. It's like,
but you got to start someone at running back. I'm not playing shit. I can't get behind.
Plug Naeem Himes and then Ezekiel goes down, and you got Tony Pollard that you're plugging for.
At least give me one RB1 and maybe plug and play the second.
And again, styles are different. Redraft, I'm grabbing my running backs early, especially the way redrafts are built out. I've never been a couple of years ago. It was all the rage to 0 running back, and I think that it's certainly shifted with bell cows that we've come into the league. I can get behind. I can kind of, depending on what format you're doing, get behind an anchor running back idea where you're using a top running back of your first pick, and then you're building your rest of your roster and you're trying to stream that running back 2 position. Redraft, yes, but I can talk about Dynasty. Really, you got these top running backs and you're riding them until the wheels fall off, because getting good trade value can be very, very difficult because people don't want to buy in on Derrick Henry at the deadline this year. You don't know if that's the last great 6 games of Derrick Henry's career. And so that can make it difficult.
I just feel the wide receiver pool is just so much deeper. like I said, I faded to the 5th round. I got a DJ Moore. I got Chris Godwin in the 6th, the same round that Jerry Jeudy went. We're talking Chase Claypool's going around there. Deebo Samuel, I think, is going to have a really good season. He's going to reemerge and his stock's going to go up. Michael Gallup's going to be a free agent at the end of this year. He's more and less likely to probably leave Dallas, go to a situation where he gets more targets, becomes more of a focal point of the offense. Almost every single team has 2 or 3 viable weapons on the outside. And I just find myself finding it easier to get Cooper Kupp late and have a starting wide receiver, get Robert Woods later, have a starting wide receiver. And then some of these guys that are coming in the draft that you can get, like Rondale Moore and Waddle and Devontae Smith. I think Devontae Smith is going very graciously in startup drafts right now, and we know the talent, and I think he's going to have a great career. And even on the other side, Jalen Reagor, damn near free. So the wide receivers go forever.
But I get those guys too. So and in my mind, and we talk about.
Let me guess, you never start a running back in your flex.
No, I know I don't.
You just plan on like
I just load up all the wide receivers,
all right,
and then quick, if I can just fill 2 spots, that's what I do.
I will say,
and I think that is tough because people have that mindset that, okay, well, I've got my 2 starting wide receivers, and I got to make sure that I got a running back to have in this spot too. Like while they're drafting, and you kind of have to divorce that mindset. You kind of have to have that willingness of like, hey, I might take 6 wide receivers before I take a running back, and I'm fine staring at that blank hole in my lineup during a startup. And not everybody can get quite there.
Oh man. I feel like we could talk about this for a lot, for a long time, because I am so opposite. I'm so fucking opposite.
Styles make fights, man.
Talking about blank holes, and we're pushing an hour here, so we're gonna have to finish, and we're definitely gonna have to do this again. So, last 5-10 minutes of this show, since we've been talking about running backs so much, and wide receivers, and the quarterbacks, and a little bit of the strategy, and you want to talk about blank holes. Usually, the blank hole on my Dynasty startup is the tight end position. It's someone that it's a position that after the top 3 now it's 4 guys, it falls off a humongous cliff that I'm just more or less going to be streaming. Like you want to stream running backs, like to me, that's what I want to do with tight ends. I want to find the guy that emerges, and tight ends the position that it's usually it's not a perennial like 1st round pick like Kyle Pitts is. There's not a ton of those. George Kittle was a 5th round pick. Mark Andrews was a third day pick, excuse me. Jordan Thomas came out of nowhere. Darren Waller came out of absolutely nowhere. It's more or less a transplant position. None of these players usually that are starring in the NFL play this position since middle school or anything. It's usually a big wide receiver that's gained weight, a defensive player that switched sides, a former basketball player that jumps in and emerges, a former quarterback like Jordan Thomas, who I really, really like. Maybe not so much in Dynasty because of his age, but let's face it, he hasn't got hit a lot. So how do you attack the tight end position?
I like to get one of the top, in my mind, there's top 4. You can slide Hawkinson. I end up with Hawkinson a lot in the 5th round. So I like to get one of those guys. I usually want to walk out with one of the top 5. I take a lot of the top. I did the last startup I did, I took 8 tight ends. So I just load up at tight end. So I load up at wide receiver, I load up at tight end, and then I just take dart throws at running back is how I typically like to build my rosters.
Are you playing a little keep away? Do you like is that how you look at it a little bit? You keep away from the rest of the league?
I am trying to accrue as much value as possible, and I think that there's a lot of value in tight end. You look at, I feel like Noah Fant is going too late, maybe people are they're worried about that. Denver is the most interesting team right now in fantasy, in my opinion, because people are convinced that it's going to be Drew Lock, and maybe it will be Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. But there is more than a sliver of a chance that it's Aaron Rodgers, and all of a sudden you're talking about the value just being completely wrong on everybody if that were to happen. And so that is interesting in my mind, and Noah Fant is a guy that I'm willing to take. But I just think there's so much value. You look at, I'm much higher on Jonathan Smith than a lot of people, but really that tight end 8 through – you go even the tight end 20 there's just so much value there that you can get guys. And certainly, yeah, I mean, some of it's factor of keep away. But if you get 4 of those guys on your roster, you're sitting at tight end 20. You're in 12-team league. I mean, people are struggling to find a tight end 1 or tight end 2. People like you that are just kind of streaming the position that are looking for whatever. You just kind of keep peppering those, and so that is probably maybe where I make up for it in running back, is that I try to get that difference from the tight end versus somebody that's just really hoping to get 3 catches and a touchdown.
So you are playing keep away. No, I'm joking.
Well, if it's on my roster, it's not on your roster.
I get that for sure. And I'll never be mad at anybody for collecting young value. I'm not going to lie, your wide receiver stance, if you're collecting 22, 23, 24-year-old players that are more than likely their values are going to rise, it's never a bad idea. They're going to last longer than the running backs. I think running backs, I feel you need top-tier running backs to compete for a championship week in, week out to get to the playoffs. We all know the people can emerge in the playoffs that are nobodies. That can give you big games because of injuries and everything like that. I think you need top-tier running backs to get to the playoffs. That's my stance. I'll never be mad at you for taking the 6 best players that just happen to be wide receivers. It's just I feel it's really hard to go, all right, I'm going to trade you 2 really good wide receivers for a top-tier running back. To me, even if I need wide receiver, it's like, I need a running back. Like, to me, that's how most of my leagues trade. So you have to draft accordingly to how you think your league is going to play things. So if your team or your league, fades tight ends and you gallop them all up and you play keep away. And if you want them, you're going to have to pay a tax. And that's how it works. So the tight end position to me, like I said, I try to go find these guys, but I'll still take value. I love that you said Fan. He's my tight end 5. Hawkinson 6, I actually have Fan ahead of Hawkinson. I believe the talent gap is different, even though my 2020 Kings, Hawkinson's much higher. I think he's going to have a ton of catches this season. Mark Andrews, I'm a little lower than a lot of people. He's touchdown dependent, very much. Dallas Goedert, we're hoping we see a lot from him, but a little bit of injury concerns. He's been banged around a lot in Philly. And then there's a tier that you mentioned a lot of the players, Jonnu Smith, Irv Smith for me, Hunter Henry, Logan Thomas, old man Evan Ingram. Let's not how he has fallen. I mean, we're talking he's my tight end 13. Where do you have him?
Tight end 15.
Injury concerns. It's not a talent thing. And it sounds like you're maybe not so high on the Giants totally and Daniel Jones, which there's a huge amount of question marks. There really is.
The Giants are a paradox to me because either we're much too low on Daniel Jones or we're much too high on all the other players, because in order to kind of boost up where, I feel like Kenny Galladay is really kind of starting to gain a little bit of heat now that people feel more comfortable about his injury. There's certainly a hive of Kadarius Toney, and Kadarius Toney is the most polarizing player in rookie drafts right now because people are either convinced that he's way too late or people just won't touch him. Saquon to have that value. If we're going to see a tight end 1 season out of Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard is a good player. He's still there. Slayton, I don't know if we really
Slayton's
have much
talent.
He's got a ton of talent.
Yeah.
So the thing of it is to be able to make these guys fantasy relevant, naturally Daniel Jones would have to be a quarterback 1 borderline, or else it's one of those things that it's if we're getting high on these individual pieces, but we're still low on the quarterback, that doesn't quite jive.
Well, we did see Teddy Bridgewater.
That's
have
fair.
3 wide receivers in the top, I believe, 25 last year. And McCaffrey was hurt,
and there was no tight end production at all. On
no tight end production. And Mike Davis produced when he was in there, but it was because of points per reception. They weren't scoring fucking touchdowns. They weren't. So it's nothing I think that can repeat itself. Daniel Jones is a much different player. He takes a lot more chances. He's not as safe. Bridgewater is almost too safe. Yes. I think Daniel Jones, you're going to know everything you need to know about Daniel Jones after this year. If he gets hurt, then he's too damn injury prone. If he plays good, then okay, maybe we have something. If he does not perform with the players you just mentioned, he is on his way out the door, and he's a complete bust because they went out of their way, a team with a humongous hole at a ton of positions, to draft a wide receiver in the first round, to bring in the highest paid free agent wide receiver, Kenny Golladay. Saquon Barkley was the second overall pick. Like, Evan Ingram was a first round pick. Like, he has the weapons at his hands. You're going to know everything you need to know about Daniel Jones at the end of this year. So real quick, I want to do a little exercise. On your tight end rankings. So say we're in the 5th round. I only think these guys would last in the 5th round. Say we're in the 4th round, and you're sitting there looking at Joe Mixon, our tight end, Darren Waller. Where do you go?
Oh, Darren Waller, easily.
Over Joe Mixon, really?
Yeah.
Low on Mixon. Okay, how about Darren Waller? Let's go up my list a little bit. Let's see where you don't take Darren Waller. I know you're down on Josh Jacobs. So let's go Darren. Let's go Darren Waller or Derrick Henry.
In a startup, I would take Darren Waller. Darren Waller is my tight end too.
Oh, in a startup, Darren Waller or Najee Harris?
Darren Waller still. Is it tight end premium?
Either or. I mean, I tight end premium.
Yeah, and I see some argument that tight end premium is really 2 tight end leagues are really only tight end premium. I mean, they're right there. They're really close for me, but the age might swing it for Najee. You're certainly in range where I would probably take a running back.
Darren Waller or Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
Oh, Darren Waller. I'm not that high on Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Darren Waller or J.K. Dobbins?
Well, I've got Najee in front of J.K. Dobbins, so I think if I took Darren Waller there, I'd have to take Darren Waller over J.K. Dobbins.
Holy shit, let's go. Ezekiel Elliott, already know the answer. Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams. Wow. All right, let's get down one. Let's end it with this. Who's your tight end 3?
My tight end 3? Do you really want to know?
Yeah, sure.
Travis Kelce's my tight end 3.
All right, Travis Kelce or Austin Eckler. And I already know you're going to say
Kelce.
I love it, man. So I will say you have some courage in your fucking convictions, and I believe you're a man of your words. I'm not. I believe.
Yeah, I can show you. I can show you my boards from startups that I've done.
I bet you own a ton of Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, T.J. Hawkinson, and all those wide receivers you mentioned. And you're a man that wants to go out, and I bet you're playing that waiver wire very hard.
Absolutely
on running backs. Oh, dynasties! Like, I'm in so many leagues.
See, that's the biggest thing. I love to lock in these wide receivers that I know are going to have key roles. I love to fill my flex position with these wide receivers, and then I just work the running back waiver wire.
It's so much.
Nonstop.
It's so much in the wire. It's so much in the wire. I've transferred a little bit. I used to like a 20-man dynasty roster. I don't mind a 25 or plus because I like to get these players. I don't want to play the wire.
I like a 28-man roster usually.
I don't want to play the wire with everything I got in dynasty every single week.
But the thing of it is I feel like, a wide receiver like Devontae Parker is kind of worthless to me, like on your dynasty roster, or like a guy like Darius Slayton is kind of worthless to me on your dynasty roster because even some of these wide receivers that, they have the playing time, you see them taking snaps, an injury, you might think they're going to move up the target tree, but that doesn't always happen. And, a guy like Jalen Guyton, I feel like people are all over Jalen Guyton for some reason, but San Diego's got, or not San Diego, but the LA's got him running 9 routes the entire time. That's all he does is clear guys out of it. And so people are convinced that if Keenan Allen goes down, all of a sudden Jalen Guyton's going to get 11 targets. It's like, no, dude, they're having him run straight in a straight line down the field, and they're throwing to the other guys. And so I just think there's so many wasted wide receiver roster spots. And especially if you're playing. So my home league, what we do is your draft position is based upon essentially best ball runs in the background and determines your draft position. So really a lot of these guys, a guy like Jalen Guyton, he goes off for 18, 20 points on your bench because you're not going to be playing him. And that's hurting your draft position in the background. And so I just think I like to take a lot of wide receivers early, but I concentrate my wide receivers, and I don't like to have a lot of wide receivers cluttering my roster, and I just use those spots to get running backs.
I can see a little light at your tunnel. I'm gonna finish this with this because I feel like me and you could talk for hours.
Yeah.
So I see the light at the end of the tunnel, the Jeff Bell tunnel, and when everybody is taking some of those wide receivers you don't want, you're probably eating up the J.D. McKissicks, the Tarek Cohens, the Nyheim Hines, the Phillip Lindsays, Kenneth Gainwells, maybe even Mike Davis, Tony Pollard, Salvin Ahmad. When everybody is reaching for some of the wide receivers you don't want, you fill your roster with 5 or 6 pass catching running backs that you can intertwine in your lineups week to week, play them, stream them, try to get as many handcuffs as you want. And like you said, like Tony Pollard is a high-end handcuff to have. JD McKissick caught a ton of passes last year. Even whatever's going on there in Arizona, the James Conner, the Chase Edmonds. I mean, to me, those are just 1-year fill-ins. It's hard to get a stable any stability out of them. Like you said, if it goes south, you'll be in position to draft a running back the next season. But if it doesn't go south and you make the playoffs and you just didn't quite have enough to win your league, but then you're out of position to be in the position to draft a running back, I think it could. There's 2 sides of that story. I'm seeing the light a little bit. It's not going to be my strategy, but I know exactly.
I'm a mad scientist.
I'm feeling it a little bit. I'm feeling it. You're playing the wire heavy.
Yeah.
Very heavy.
Yep.
Possibly tinkering with some trades. I mean, I'm a big, you're either a pretender or a contender. And if you're pretending to contend, that's the worst thing to do in Dynasty. If you're pretending to contend, that means you throw away not throw away your assets, but throw them into trades for right now type players, and then it folds and doesn't work, and then you're left without picks the next season and you have an older team. I'm also, if you don't think it's a championship winning team and you might get the last seed or you might be the last one out of the playoffs, then okay, let's move some assets. Let's try to build around the next year's success. You're a Debbie guy. I advise anybody, as soon as your league allows you to trade for 2023 picks, you build a stable of 2023 picks.
Yeah.
Build them. We can go for hours about the running backs in just that class.
Yes.
It's very similar to the 2020 class. And the 2020 class did not have Najee Harris or Travis Etienne in it, and it should have. It would have been remarkable. This class is just as deep, just as talented, just as top-heavy. As soon as your league allows you to trade for those picks, that's even some of my teams I believe that might be able to contend. I will move pieces around to try to start preparing for that draft because it's going to be epic. And if you can have one epic draft, it can give you 5 to 7 years of success in Dynasty, and you might have to just give up 1 year of competing. So that's kind of my last words. How do you feel on the 2023 draft? And then I guess kind of your final thoughts on our pod today.
Yeah, so my top 2 assets in Devi right now are in the 2023 class, Bijan Robinson and DJ Uliangalele. I think those are the 2 guys at the top of my board, and so we're waiting for that class. You know, the other running backs, you know, you got the dude from Georgia Tech,
Jamar
Gibbs, yes. And then Tank Bigsby waiting for Auburn. I mean, there's so much talent coming in. And, you know, you touched on it a little bit. 2022, I got Isaiah Spiller as my running back 1, Brees as my running back 2. And there is certainly Eric Gray, maybe a guy that can close that gap. And I just worry about the size on some of the other guys that were kind of with Kyron Williams and the other guys on the roster. So, yes, you're exactly right. Load up for those 2023 picks. If you can find yourself in position to get DJ Uiagalelei and Bijan Robinson, then you are looking at 2 cornerstone pieces that arguably we might, if you put them in a draft right now, you might be taking them at the end of the first round of a startup draft. So you could be talking about 2, not only first round picks, but first round startup picks that are potentially in that class.
Yeah, Austin had him in his tier 0.
Yeah, I
love that guy. He has a tier 0, and Bijan's in it.
Yeah,
Trevor was in it. I didn't ask him anybody else, possibly Saquon, but tier 0. It's above tier 1.
I'm doing a C2C league with Austin right now, so
Oh my God. I hope you come prepared. I really hope you come
We're in
prepared.
round 32 and he's whooping me. So
I'll throw darts. Everybody in the league I was in, just throw darts at whoever has a cool name.
Yep.
Anyway, Jeff, such good stuff today. I can't wait to have you back on. Any last words, my friend?
No, I'm just so appreciative of the opportunity. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been fantastic talking to you. And, you got a lot of great ideas. And like I said, styles make fights. And so it's a lot of fun to talk to somebody that thinks a little different than you. And that's really what we're all about. What we're doing here is just get different ideas out, respect the other person. And so it's been a great opportunity.
Great stuff as always, Jeff. Thanks a lot for coming on. I'll have you back soon, and I'll be talking with you again. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
Thank you.
So that's Roster Rescue. We're out. Go ahead and contact me on Twitter at Zack Zander. Any questions? I'm here to give the answers. So everybody, this podcast is out, and I'll see you